Hello everybody, this is Nintendo, and I'm going to give my review / thoughts on Pokémon Scarlet and Violet's DLC, the Teal Mask, Part 1, or Part 1 in Teal Mask. This was better than I initially thought. Now, going into this DLC, I had zero expectations, like absolutely zero. If I'm being honest, I'm not as excited, or at least I wasn't as excited for the DLC as I was with Sword and Shield's DLC when that initially came out. Because despite what people are saying, Pokémon Scarlet and Violet are pretty decent games compared to their predecessors. Like yes, Sword and Shield had a lot to be desired, and I mean a lot to be desired. But the DLC, or at least the second DLC, gave us a lot of things that, for me personally, were missing from base game Sword and Shield. For the sake of this review, I'm only going to be comparing the Isle of Armor to the Teal Mask, as it was part 1 of Sword and Shield, and this is part 1 of Scarlet and Violet. So without further ado, let's dive into it. And I want to preface this by saying, this will be kind of rough in some areas, but pretty good in others. So yeah, the DLC starts off with us getting a report from Professor Jock telling us that we've been randomly selected to participate in a school field trip. And timeline wise, I do believe that this is taking place sometime during the main story of Scarlet and Violet. So this is happening between our 3 quests, and we are going to do this secret 4th quest, which is the Teal Mask. So the characters and everything we're introduced to, I believe we will see them in part 2. But for the most part, the main characters of the main story do not appear in part 1 due to this taking place during the events of the main game. So if you were to come here with an underleveled team, the levels would scale to you, which I think is really good because I personally came in with my post-game team and it made the game decently difficult in some areas, which I was not expecting. The Pokemon that came back are very good. We got iconic favorites like Yanma, Yanmega, Milotic, Como-O, who was absent from the main game. Both he and Metagross were. They were both the only 2 pseudo-legendaries that were not present in the base game, but I believe Metagross is returning in part 2 and Como-O is here in part 1. So I think that is a pretty good thing that, you know, everything's coming back slowly, drip-fed, but they are coming back. I want to address the big elephant in the room, that being the frame rate and the world. Now, personally, I did experience a lot of frame rate issues here and there. I also experienced a segment where I was battling and I just clipped through the world and then I just respawned back inside the world at random points. I think I have that recorded on my Switch, but yeah, there were moments where I just clipped in and out of the world, and it wasn't as bad as Scarlet and Violet's was. It was only a one-time thing. The frame rate issues are still there, but I feel like that's just because the game hasn't been optimized, and I wasn't really expecting the game to be properly optimized for this DLC, which is kind of sad. But yeah, I wasn't expecting a full optimization. I was just expecting a side story, and that's pretty much what we got. But compared to Sword and Shield side story, Scarlet and Violet is a huge step above that. My biggest gripe with Sword and Shield's Isle of Armor is that you go there, you meet this legendary Pokemon, or supposedly he's a legendary, named Kubfu, which evolves into Urshifu. And I am going to say this now, I hate gift legendary Pokemon. I don't like them at all. It can be like type Null, so Valai, Cosmog that you get in the post game. I do not like gift legendaries. I do not like gift mythical Pokemon. I miss the old days where you could go back and catch mythicals like in Gens 4 and 5 and even 3 and even 2 with Celebi. My biggest gripe with Sword and Shield was that there was no post-game legendaries until a year after the game came out, in which you got to catch the Regis and Calyrex and the Birds and all the other previous legendaries leading up to that point. But here in Teal Mask, we actually get to catch the new legendary Pokemon, that being Ogerpon and the 3 new Loyal 3, that's what they're called, the Loyal 3. So I am very happy to see that Game Freak is at least listening to fans when they say that we don't like gift Pokemon in the slightest. I know that might be hard for them because, you know, not everybody wants to catch stuff, but if you remove one of the best pivotal points of Pokemon, which is catching your Pokemon, you even made a whole game based about that back in 2018 with Let's Go. If you remove the catching aspect from Pokemon, it just becomes a gifting simulator where you just battle, and I am not a fan of that in the slightest. So I am very happy that we get to do that. So my first comparison, the legendary Pokemon, a lot better. I love the Loyal 3, I love Ogerpon. I felt more attached to them than I did Cupfu, which is kind of ironic, seeing that in Sword and Shield you had an entire segment of the DLC where you had to bond with Cupfu in order to get him to evolve into Urshifu. So I felt more attached with Ogerpon because it had a sad backstory. Slight spoilers, it had a sad backstory. It was presumably had its master murdered by the Loyal 3. I don't think they want to emphasize that. They kind of hinted at it, but it had its master killed. It was hunted by the village, ridiculed by the village for the past 200 years, while the true villains, being the Loyal 3, were regarded as heroes due to a misunderstanding that happened around 200 or so years prior to the events of the main game. Funny enough, I think that's just the same time that the Area Zero expedition happens. But yeah, the next thing I want to move on to is the location of Kitakami, and a lot of people are expecting this to be the upper left-hand corner of Paldea's map, which shockingly enough, it isn't. Kitakami is a new region. Granted, it is a very small region, but if we are going based off of real-life places in the world, it would make sense that we have smaller regions that don't have like many established governments than we do with the big regions like Sinnoh and Unova and Kalos and even Paldea. So we are in a new place in comparison to, you know, Sword and Shield, where you just went to a small extension of Galar, which was the Isle of Armor, which is based off the Isle of Man in the UK. So it was pretty cool. I am kind of sad that we don't have a new DLC taking inspirations from other parts of Spain. It feels kind of like a waste. While I do like the DLC story-wise and all that, I do feel like they have a lot to work with in the country they're basing their region off of, and they kind of wasted that to go back to Japan again. And I feel like a lot of people, I know I'm personally not tired of Japan. I do have a bit of a burnout from, you know, like animes, things like that. But I do know that a lot of people, I do have friends in Spain that said that they wish that they would take advantage of more other locations that Spain has to offer instead of going back to Japan just to tell a side story. But despite that, the story itself is, again, really good, and it perfectly sets up part 2, which is where my second part of this my third part of this review comes in, the story. Now, if you know me, I am a big advocate for stories in RPGs. I feel like that is one of the most important and integral parts of any RPG ever, because you can have good gameplay and have a really bad story, and I will trash your game if it has a really bad story compared to a game that has a good story but like bad gameplay. I can play a game with bad gameplay and a good story over a game with a bad story and good gameplay, because what am I working towards? I don't care about the story if, you know, if the gameplay is good. I don't care about the bad story if the gameplay is good. That's not how it works for me personally. So in the Part 1 DLC, you were introduced to your 2 new rivals, which, by the way, this generation has been tremendously just amazing with the rivals compared to Gen 8. Gen 7 had good rivals too. I am a huge Hal fan. I don't care what people say. I feel like if you hate a guy for being happy, you have issues to work out with. But I do really enjoy Nemona and Arven, and I'm not sure if Penny is considered a rival, but I do enjoy her as well. And here we are introduced to Kieran and Carmine. And Carmine is a bit of a jerk, but in a unique way. In past generations, we have kind of been obsessed with this notion of we need a mean rival, we need an awful person. But here we got a mean rival. She's just not mean to us. At least she is mean to us, but not later on. it seems like the roles get reversed, where we have a rival in the name of like Kieran, who's like really nice to us, but as the story progresses, we kickstart his villain arc, which I think is insane. I don't think Pokemon's ever done that before. Now, Kieran does share parallels with Hop from the previous generation in the sense that you do essentially take away their dreams, but Hop kind of goes about it in a sense of, oh, I can become something else. Maybe this isn't cut out for me. While Kieran is more like, no, you stole my dream from me. I kind of hate you for that. And I think that is a unique twist on a rival that they have never done before, which is shocking. We are so used to having rivals that kind of just suck up to you after you beat them and steal their dreams, like Barry or Charon or even Hop. The biggest example is definitely Hop, but Kieran is the big de facto. Instead of him becoming a better person and realizing that maybe I'm not cut out because I'm next to a Mary Sue, he's like, no, I'm gonna keep getting stronger because I have to win. You took everything from me, and I really enjoyed that. Now, Carmine, again, she is a jerk, and I feel like her character was tackled decently, but she kinda doesn't take fault for any of her actions, because while our character may be the ones that kickstart Kieran's villain arc, Carmine definitely amplified that with just treating him then less than what he was. We know from fighting Kieran in the DLC that he is a strong and capable trainer, but Carmine loves to undermine him because he is her younger brother, which I think is pretty kind of just bad, you know? And she doesn't learn her lesson at the end, which I believe they probably are saving this for part 2 of the DLC. Maybe she'll actually apologize and be a better person, but now she's just irredeemable in some aspects, but decent in others. While she warms up to us, she kind of just, again, treats her brother like he's less than what he is, and I really hope the second DLC tackles that more, which my biggest compliment is that the story, again, it sets up the second DLC so well. We know that there could, like, this small region, despite it being miles and miles away from Paldea, instances of Terapagos, which is the third legendary, the big mystery of this generation. He has been to Kitakami in some, some way or form, because we see terrestrialized crystals here. Ogerpon is the first Pokemon we know that has terrestrial forms versus just terrestrializing. So this is a super big deal, at least to the world of Pokemon, that this legendary, this mysterious Pokemon is here in some way, shape, or form, and I think that is super interesting. We are going to be visiting Blueberry Academy, which Carmine and Kieran are studying at, so we will meet them again, which is why they kind of introduced them and hyped them up to be big players in the second part, which I think is going to be super exciting. I can't wait to fight Kieran at his fullest in the second part, because his fight, as easy as it was in some areas, and this is a very slim area, his fight was actually pretty difficult. He had competitive items, focus sashes, berries. His team was actually well-rounded. It was very, very good. So the final thing I want to touch on is the new Pokemon that were introduced. And I briefly touched upon the legendaries, but there were 3 other new Pokemon introduced, and one of those is Dipplin. Now Dipplin, if you guys haven't been paying attention, he is a 3rd evolution of the Applin line, which I think is pretty cool. I do like that Gen 8, even though we just came off Gen 8, it was a previous generation. They are taking the time to revisit these still kind of new-ish Pokemon and give them more, and I really do like Dipplin. It is a cool concept that there are 2 Applin living in a caramel apple essentially, and if you guys haven't been paying attention to the competitive side, you can use an Eviolite on Dipplin, which means that it may have a further evolution down the line, which I think is pretty interesting to know about. I actually shiny hunted Dipplin, so I can see its new evolution if we are able to evolve it, hopefully, maybe, kind of, sort of. I am just really loving that design. It's really cool. So the next Pokemon is Poltergeist and Sinistra, which I made a video talking about Poltergeist when it was revealed. I think it's a pretty goofy concept. Matcha Tea, which I say that, but Poltergeist and Sinistra are already two Pokemon that exist, and they are continuing with this regional fake. I think that's what the fan base has called it now, regional fakes. And while they are cool, I really do wish it was a different Pokemon. I was advocating for like a regional fake Spiritomb or something cooler like that, but those two are there, and I do kind of appreciate Janae for getting some representation, while I do wish there were other Mons that got represented, like, I don't know, like Cramorant or Phalanx or, you know, Thievul. Yeah, Thievul. I do wish that other Mons got, you know, representation, but I am happy that we have what we have, but I'm not going to be upset about that. So that is going to be pretty much it. If you want my rating on a DLC, I will give it a solid 7.5 out of 10. Too much Kitakami. Could be something else. Anyways, see you guys in the next video. My name is Kim Tendo. Thank you guys so much for watching this long video on a review of Kitakami Part 1 DLC. If you guys want to see more videos like this, make sure to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and I will see you guys when I see you. Bye.